Hello again if you've watched a video here before, but if you haven't, welcome. In this video, we'll have a look again at the Giza Plateau in Egypt and how mountains relate to Giza. Uh, I've showed that mountains, really big mountains around the world, and their distances to Giza are ordered by the ratio between the meter and the yard here. If you have the measure tool here, the meter and the yard. But in this video, we'll have a look at mountains that are ordered by another ratio in their distances to Giza. That between the kilometer here and the mile, so the kilometer-mile ratio. And I have 4 pairs of mountain distances here. And they are also the really big ones, if you will. Globally, or you can say regionally also. And there's a clear order to these, how they zero in on the Giza Plateau, these 4 pairs of mountains. So I thought I'd just introduce them as I go here and go from pair 1 to pair 4. The first pair, again we have Mount Kilimanjaro here, the highest mountain in Africa. And then we have that coming in a pair with a mountain out in the Atlantic Ocean, namely the highest mountain in the Atlantic Ocean. Number 1 there also, and that's Mount Teide here on Tenerife. So that's the first pair. And I thought I'd just... And the ratio between these two distances, should mention that first. Mount Teide to Giza is exactly as 2 kilometers, while Mount Kilimanjaro to Giza is exactly as 1 mile. So 2 kilometers and 1 mile is the ratio between these. So let's just start to measure these. Here is the peak of Mount Teide then, and in kilometers here. And to Giza from this peak. Just has to clear up in a second. So all of these 4 pairs of distances and big mountains perfectly ordered in their distances to Giza. And this is then pair number 1. Mount Teide and Mount Kilimanjaro. And the distance here we have Giza. The distance here from Mount Teide is 4,620 kilometers. We have it down here in the measure tool, the top row here. To exactly, well, it's around the Sphinx and the Valley Temple here. If we divide that in half, we get 2,310. And that's what we'll find in miles then from Mount Kilimanjaro to Giza. So let's measure. Here's the peak of Mount Kilimanjaro. And I previously showed this distance in meters in the other video. And the correlation there. But this time it's the mile value of this. So let's just let it clear up a little bit. There it is. And up to Giza. So 2,310 miles is what we're looking for here. And that's to the Great Pyramid here, 2,310. Exactly half the numbers we then had in kilometers from Mount Teide to here. And here we have it in the top row there, 2,310 miles. So the ratio there was then 2 kilometers and 1 mile to Giza from those 2 number 1 mountains in Africa and the Atlantic Ocean. The next pair is Mount Kenya to Giza. We have Mount Kenya down here to Giza, the second highest in Africa. And it connects with the distance from this mountain out in the Atlantic Ocean. And that's Monte Pico on the Azore Islands here. And that's the highest mountain on this mountain chain that runs the length of the Atlantic Ocean north to south, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's the highest mountain on that ridge. So it has that distinction, if you will. And here the ratio between these two is 1 kilometer and 1 mile exactly to Giza and to the second pyramid. If I measure here from Monte Pico first in miles then, we find a distance from right here. I think we find the peak of Monte Pico. So there is the very peak. And as always, I've tried to measure these distances from the very highest point I find in Google Earth on any mountain. And there I've placed a pin, and that's where I measure to and from. So if you are trying this yourself for some reason, then do your best to locate the very highest point. And if you have previously, for example, typed in the name of the mountain and Google flies you there, you may have to do a little bit of work to locate the peak. But that's how I've done. I measure from the very highest point I have found in Google Earth. So let's fly to Giza now from Monte Pico. And in miles now to the second pyramid here on the Giza Plateau, this one. There is a distance here in the top row there, the map length, 3,399.37 miles. 3399.37 in miles. And that's what we're then going to find also from Mount Kenya, but in kilometers, exactly to the second pyramid here. So let's measure then from Mount Kenya to Giza. And right here in a second is then the peak of Mount Kenya. Sorry. Well, very soon. There, and from the very peak here of Mount Kenya then to Giza. And again to the second pyramid here. If you watch the middle row here, the ground length distance, we have 3,399.37 again, but now in kilometers, exactly here to the second pyramid. So the ratio between these two then was 1 kilometer and 1 mile to Giza. Those were the first two pairs. Let's move now from the Atlantic Ocean inward into the Mediterranean Ocean and closer to Giza, where we find the next pair of distances that are ordered then by the kilometer-mile ratio to Giza. And this pair is, here we have Mount Etna, the highest mountain peak in all of the Mediterranean Ocean, on any island. So highest in this ocean also, Mount Etna. But it comes in a pair with this location. And this is on the coast of Tunisia here. And right up here in northern Tunisia, we have the northernmost land of all of Africa. And it's called the extreme point of Africa, to the north, in the cardinal direction of north. Once you've stepped foot on this little cape here, you can't get further north on the mainland of Africa. So exactly, well, where is it? Here, there is a little cape, and that's the northernmost land of Africa, Africa's northern extreme point. And we'll measure from here to Giza in kilometers. And to the Great Pyramid here, we have a distance, just when we reach it, of 2,139.16 kilometers. If we divide that in half, we get 1,069.58. And that's what we'll find in miles from the peak of Mount Etna to the Great Pyramid. So let's measure and see if that's correct. So Mount Etna now, and the very peak of it is right here, just north of the large crater here. That's the highest point I've found here in Google Earth. If I zoom out a little bit, here is the large northern crater, and right there is a very high point of Mount Etna then. Here. So let's measure from there to, again, Giza and the Great Pyramid. And we should then find 1069.58 miles. That's what we're looking for, and it's here. We have 1069.58 in miles in this middle row here, and that then means that Mount Etna to the Great Pyramid is 1 mile, as 1 mile compared to Africa's northern extreme point, which is as 2 kilometers exactly to Giza. So here we had again 1 mile and 2 kilometers to Giza. And the final pair, that was pair number 3, and now comes the number 4. We're even closer to Giza, and the two nearest high mountains to the north, if you will. If we stay out on the islands first, this is the highest island mountain here, Mount Ida on the island of Crete, in the easternmost Mediterranean here. And it points to Giza and the Great Pyramid. In a pair with this mountain, when we reached the Levant here, this area, that is sort of the divider between Africa and Europe and Asia. And its highest mountain is Kunat as-Sawda in Lebanon. That's the highest mountain here in this entire area. And this pair, again, we have the ratio of Mount Ida to the Great Pyramid is as 2 kilometers. Kunat as-Sawda is as 1 mile. So let's measure these and start with Mount Ida in kilometers. And the high point of Mount Ida is here, right there, in a second. So from there to Giza. And again then to the Great Pyramid here. We have a distance of, within the footprint here, of 833.8 kilometers. You can see it here in the middle row there. If we divide that in half, we get 416.9. 416.9. And if we measure now from Kunat as-Sawda, that's what we'll find in miles to the Great Pyramid. And here is then the peak of Kunat as-Sawda. In a second, let it just clear up a little. So there is the peak of Kunat as-Sawda, and we fly to Giza. And we're looking for 416.9 miles here. And that's what we find here within the footprint of the Great Pyramid. Exactly, we had double the numbers, 833.8 in kilometers from Mount Ida. So then in the last pair again, the ratio is from Mount Ida to Giza, 2 kilometers, and Kunat as-Sawda, 1 mile. Exactly, again, there. So that should reinforce what I stated in the video about meter-yard distances from mountains to Giza. And here we have kilometer-mile ratio distances. Clearly from these high mountains that come in pairs. And not just mountains, this was also an extreme point of the continent of Africa. Precisely from it to Giza. And the kilometer-mile ratio ordering these distances. So again, the very units of measurement we use today to measure distance and their ratios. And as I'll continue to show from, firstly, mountains, between mountains in Europe, that they are ordered by these ratios also, when you compare mountain distances. And that I will get to by the meter-yard ratio and the kilometer-mile ratio. So mountains themselves are ordered by the same ratios. And that's what the creators of Giza knew. And that's the reason why they placed Giza here. So Giza relates to mountains with those very same ratios that I've showed you here then. So Giza is here. That's why it is here. Because of this. So they knew the exact size, shape, and surface topography of Earth, and how the surface topography of Earth is ordered by these very ratios between these units. So thanks for watching this video. Giza and mountains and the kilometer-mile ratio, continued evidence for Giza, that they knew the size and shape of Earth. I'll come back with more videos.